Thank you, Professor Cole. Colleagues, students and friends, Golavina, good afternoon. This presentation today is prompted by what I felt was the resonance of some of my works with the theme of nurturing talent that is part of this year's Vice Chancellor's Learning and Teaching Forum. In particular, some of the work that I've done recently in areas like film and community theater, trying to spread awareness about diabetes. I begin with an early lesson from the field, a cane field to be precise. When filming the plantation era indentured women inspired feature, Suraji, I chose to shoot scenes for the film depicting gangs of indentured women with the rural women's wing or Nari Sabha affiliated to the Tuva Sanatan branch in Nanronga in 2012. In the cane fields, I ordered the group of 24 women ranging in ages from 18 to 84 into 3 groups, a front group, a middle group, and a back group. This was actually based on what I felt was the ideal way of controlling such a large group and in trying to get a very utilitarian way of getting my film shoots done. After the first run-through, I felt very pleased with myself. I looked over the group. They were standing in the heat, and I signaled to the cameraman that the next time that we do the run-through, please start filming. Then it all began to fall apart. The oldest actor, all 84 years of her, asked for an advance to cover transport, etc. I stuck to my guns and told her that, you do the work first, and then I'll pay you later. And then I reminded her, didn't I actually pay for your transport this morning? She snorted her disgust, wrapped her orni, her head veil around her head, and then swore at me, quite loudly and very clearly. Taking matters in my own hand, and like an overseer of the colonial past, I decided that some tough talking and action was needed to get things under control. So for about 40 minutes, I began to exact a toll out of them. I got them to do their paces, got to their positions, and at an apt moment, I signaled to the cameraman again, this time, film them. And then 5 minutes later, when they had finished the walk, I told them, that's it. And they looked at me, almost screaming. And then the 84-year-old Nani, the grandmother in the crowd, nudged somebody and whispered to her. And that woman decided to come to the front. We were just about to wrap up. And she stood in my way and said, hey you, listen, you don't know a thing about what you are doing. Gurmit women did not work in the fields like this. We already know about camera and all that you've been teaching us since the morning, since yesterday. But you need to learn about us and how we go to the fields and how our ancestors went to the field. First of all, they did not have a front, middle, and back group. Secondly, they did not come into the fields like a paltan or platoon. And nobody walked into the fields in silence. They sang their work songs as they came into the field. Everyone sang. Just as I asked them where I would get the song. Their response was like the ads promoting FBC TV, and it was clear for all to see. The first clip that I will show you is how actually I conceived and very quickly shot them coming into the fields. And then you'll see the scenes as they were actually shot once I had listened to them and incorporated what they had to say into my film. So this is how I had originally shot them. And this is the completed versions once I had listened to them.
छूटे सब परिवार हो, गिरमिट कमाने फीजी लाए, छूटे सब परिवार हो, गिरमिट कमाने फीजी लाए, छूटे सब परिवार हो। आजी नानी रोय रोय बोले ओए आजी नानी रोय रोय बोले तुम लोग फीजी हमारे हो।
Okay, I think you get the idea in terms of what happens if you go out into the field and you actually listen to those people you think should be listening to you. So I was grateful for this life lesson. No matter how misguided you may be in nurturing talent in a community, as in my sorry attempts that morning, talent and the community can and often will nurture you in ways of learning beyond archives or textbooks, if you let them breathe and express themselves. The shoots were changed to expand the roles of the women, and they are the real superstars of the film. Their career in film has not ended. Last year, I signposted an American film group to them, and they did their own negotiations and acted in the production. The producer in an email commended them for their professionalism and the innovations that they brought to the set. No doubt, Nani, who has since passed away, was smiling on them from heaven or giving hell to those in a company from the skies above. This re-education from women in sugar fields was added to by more recent lessons about nurturing talent beyond the classroom. While working as a playwright, director, and producer of a series of community theater plays, training and using actors drawn from the USP Lambasa campus, the project was initiated by Professor Philip Smerada from Georgia Southwest State University. He had previously worked at USP in the economics department. The project is funded by the International Diabetes Fund. Professor Smerada in his earlier research had found that traditional methods like brochures, pamphlets, and lectures did not have the impact that was felt was required from that. And in fact, the project grew out from the response from patients, general NCD patients, when they said, what we hear, we forget. What we see, we remember. What we do, we understand. The brief given to me was that the theater troupe will stage presentations emphasizing diabetes prevention and management, as well as healthy lifestyle behaviors. These elements were incorporated into the plays, but the pre-writing included research in the local area. The identified area for the research was at the Lambasa Hospital, at the Diabetes Hub. Among patients and health specialists, we got a lot of feedback, and a lot of that was incorporated into the plays that I wrote. At the same time, this particular project had a clinical testing group that was in Lambasa based, and then you had clinical tests on a control group based at the Suva Diabetes Hub. The plays were actually performed at the Diabetes Hub while patients were waiting for their clinics. So a cohort of patients were identified and registered, and they became part of the experiment for the 2 years in 2013 and 2014. The first play that we did was called Living Life, Living Healthy. It promoted, of course, health and exercise as key factors, but it also included information provided by health specialists. For example, we did not know this, but when we were talking to the one surgeon at the Lambasa Hospital, he outlined that the dependence on traditional medicine, including common medicine such as the Wambu Sudu, that actually acts as a poison on diabetics, and that it compounds foot and limb cuts to the extent that amputation becomes the only option. So it was decided at an early stage to incorporate the local flavor of Lambasa into the plays. So that included things like references to the local sweet vendors, to local icons around the place, including the A-League soccer star Roy Krishna. Humor became an important element in lightening the atmosphere, especially in the challenging confines of doing a play at a clinic where patients are impatiently waiting for their clinics. Laughter was one of the devices that we employed, but we didn't have the luxury of actually turning the plays into comic pieces. We had to be very, very careful to ensure that the message was made very, very clear at all points, that the key issues and concepts and preventive and control measures about diabetes was always forefronted. So the themes that we got from the research area itself were incorporated. So we were not blindly following the US model. The US, the International Diabetes Federation is very prescriptive in terms of the contents that it wants from anything that it funds. And that included a prescription in terms of what the play should include. So you had to be very creative about that you actually did include all of those things, but you did it with a lot of local context and flavor incorporated into it. Right, so the second play, for example, one of the things that we noticed was a kind of dependence on faith healing and how it actually became an interference to clinical intervention in the control of diabetes. The final play, for example, highlighted familial relations and the support systems that are engendered through that on diabetes and the kinds of pressures that families and these support networks face as a result of having diabetic amongst them. The final report on this particular project is just being finalized, and one of the pleasing things that I'm able to report was that the statistics, the clinical testing actually bore out the main research question, and that it validated it, that in fact exposure to CT community theatre led to better control over their diabetes. But even if that was not the case, even if we had failed, even if the exposure had not actually led to better care among the diabetic patients that we had, the whole process of being with the troop and nurturing talent amongst the students from the Lambasa campus, as we know, we talk a lot about our regional campuses and centers, but unfortunately everybody does very little about them or include them in things. I remember trying to get funding to bring them over at various points over the last couple of years, and each time there was no money for them. Right, so this particular group, as you can see, they really grew into their roles. They grew in terms of being actors. And I'm going to leave you with two clips that actually illustrates that point about turning them from a troupe that was doing drama on a very prescriptive scale in terms of diabetes to actually translating their craft as actors to doing a literary play a couple of months ago on campus.
If you eat healthy food, you'll be a lot healthier. And once you get the taste of healthy food back, it'll be a lot tastier. Bahut sawad lagi.
Are nasi, hamzane. Oye nasi, kali mango kambaro. Just keep it simple and instant. Like Maggi. Oh, you know this one? Chow noodles. Hungry, yeah? Bahut zulum lagi huwa. No wala khana. Kaise bachcho ka plan?
Re, sombo. Don't be lazy. You know, I make my soup with leafy green vegetables. Baigan ke pati, bele ke pati, choraya ke pati, mango pati. Say I mean, what my point is, use some healthy vegetables to make your soup. Hey sister, do better. What to add so that the food is more tastier.
Ha! So good at chess, you know.
Okay, so this is the group performing within the Diabetes Hub in Lambasa. And you'll notice that the play actually moves between Fiji Hindi, English, and Fijian, if you listen to the rest of the play. And there was a very deliberate reason for doing that, because most of the patients that were there were Indo-Fijians amongst the diabetic at the Diabetes Hub. And slowly we had to actually work the language in the play to make sure that the core group that we were actually directing our information were able to access it. The last clip that I'll show is actually the translation of this kind of acting on stage in a completely different environment at USP a couple of months ago. Okay, I think you get a sense of the transition that these actors had made in a couple of years that they had been trained in theater, and how they were able to actually move between different forms. Just in the way of concluding remarks, I'd like to say that diabetes and other NCDs are not going away by themselves, but the giant steps towards control and prevention through the innovative and creative means, such as nurturing the particular troupe that you have been just seeing on screen. Dramatic theatre and performance in its various forms justify course and programs in dramatic and expressive arts at USP and in the larger regional educational framework at a low cost. It is already there and is an effective aesthetic alternative to the push for an e-everything platform. Given the growing concern by our regional leaders for effective rather than blanket e-solutions, the case for the dramatic arts and its regional relevance, given the collective aesthetics of the oral tradition and communal sense of belonging, may be a lot stronger than many of us think. Vinaka, thank you.